Welcome back to the Roots and Dirt podcast. Today we're going to be talking about carrots, what my favorite varieties are, or at least some of my favorite varieties, and some of the tips and tricks I've learned along the way to grow a great crop of carrots each growing season. Admittedly, it took me a little while to get the hang of planting carrots, growing a good solid crop of carrots each year that our family could depend on for a winter storage crop. I practice succession sowing with my carrots. That means that as soon as the ground and the temperatures are ready, I start planting carrots in the spring. Usually this is just before or around my last spring frost. I do want the ground to warm up some, so I'm not planting when the ground is 30 degrees, but usually by then my ground is nice and warm and I can start planting carrots. I also continue to plant every few weeks or so until usually early July, sometimes mid-July. Depends on the season and what the temperatures are like and how many carrots I already have in the ground. It's very important to plant carrots when your ground is a bit cooler. Now, carrots can germinate later on in the season, like I said, even I plant them then. However, they're going to grow the easiest for you if you plant them at the right time. Carrots do not like germinating in extreme heat. In fact, it will sometimes turn those seeds sterile. There are ways around this, and we'll go over that in a little bit, but ideally you want to be growing your temperatures or your carrots earlier in the spring when your temperatures are more mild. Let's say like 70s, so that will depend on where you live. I'm in Minnesota, obviously, and so for me that isn't until May-ish. But if you're farther south, you don't even have to go that much farther south, you may be able to plant significantly sooner than me. So just because I'm planting in May does not mean that you should be planting in May. I would suspect that if you lived in Texas or Florida or other places like that, you would probably want to be growing carrots in what would still be rather wintry for me. So talk to your local people, look at your forecasts, look at what your local extensions recommend for planting your carrots and go off of that. But in general, you want to be planting your carrots when it's cooler outside. Now, like I said, I do plant carrots as we get into the summer heat, and it is not uncommon for July to offer 90 plus degree days. In those instances, what I do is I plant my carrots out in the ground slightly deeper than what I normally would do, maybe half an inch deep or so, versus the maybe quarter inch I would have planted them early on, right? And so I plant them maybe about a half an inch deep, and then I am making sure that each morning and each evening I am going out and I am watering the tops of where I planted those carrots. So I'm watering the soil with nice cool water. The reason why I'm doing it then is because I do it in the morning and the evening is because I'm trying to keep a crust from forming on the top of that soil. Now, I have covered those before. I don't like covering with a board like some people recommend for two reasons. One, because it makes it hard for the rain to actually hit those carrot sowings. And I really want the rain to be able to reach that if we do happen to get some. Two, I'm notorious for maybe not getting to that board in time. And when those seedlings pop up, you really need to be removing that board immediately. So if our garden is no longer on our property, so if I can't get out there right away each day or even every day to go check on those carrots, then I am much more likely to lose those carrots due to not getting that board off in time and then having them overly exposed to sun. Another thing that I have done in the past is to cover those carrot sowings with shade cloth. Now, this actually works fairly well, especially if you're sowing when it's really hot and you aren't going to have much reprieve from the sun. Putting that shade cloth over the top just helps cut the heat a little bit. And it also helps keep the soil from forming that crust over the top. So again, tip number 1, plant for the easiest germination rates when it's nice and cool. If you're going to plant later on, you need to make sure that you are making adjustments so that those carrots can still germinate and try to supply those slightly cooler conditions for them. The second tip, and we talked a little bit about this in the last one, is that you really want to avoid a crust from forming on the top of your soil. Now again, if it's cool, it takes longer for that crust to form. The sun is really what dries out the top of that soil and forms a crust. And carrot seedlings are very delicate, and they find it very hard to push through that crust if one forms, virtually killing your seedlings before they emerge from the ground. I do 2 things to protect against this. 1, again, I water in the morning and I water in the evening to keep that from happening. 2, carrot seedlings really need to stay moist, and so that watering also helps keep those seedlings moist so that they can germinate well. Another thing I do to help protect against that crust and also have just a better germination rate is I sow my carrots quite densely. Now, I know some people will say that's wasting seed, but what's wasting more seed? Sowing slightly more dense and then having to do maybe a little bit more thinning at some point, or sowing all of your seeds and having most of them not come up because there simply wasn't enough there to help them push through the soil. Now, in my experience, sowing your seeds a little bit more dense really helps. It's like teamwork makes the dream work, right? When you have a bunch of you and you're all working towards the same goal, it's much easier to achieve said goal. When there's a lot of little carrot seedlings and they're all working together to push up out of the soil, it's much easier for them to break through that top crust or that top layer of soil and really become viable carrots down the road. Another thing that I do to ensure that I have a great crop of carrots, or another thing you will want to do to make sure you have a great crop of carrots, is plant the right type of carrot for your soil. Okay, so where I am, I'm fortunate enough that I'm growing in some of the best soil probably in the nation, right? So I can plant almost any type of carrot that I want. But if you live where your soil is slightly more compacted, or you have a real clay-based soil or a very rocky soil, you're going to want to plant something that maybe stays a little bit shorter and is a little more blunt, like an ox heart, something that isn't going to fork trying to make its way down through all of this tough rocky soil. In my instance, well, I love imperator type carrots. Things like the sugar snacks, they're such a delicious carrot, right? But they can grow sometimes in my soil like 18 inches long on a good year. And I'm now having to try to figure out how to dig up an 18-inch carrot. I've done it, and it's a ton of fun to pull up these massive carrots, but then they also don't store as well in my regular Ziploc size bag, right? Like, how do you fit an 18-inch carrot in a bag? It just doesn't work that well. So I consider, when I am thinking about what I would like to plant, things like that. Maybe I still plant those, but I don't plant as many of them, and I plant more of a standard size carrot so that it stores really well for me through the winter. Another thing you'll want to be considering is what is your goal in planting said carrots, right? As I said in the beginning, carrots are a staple storage crop for our family. I absolutely love carrots. I don't have to do anything to those carrots to store them, really. I can just put them in my fridge and be done, and we'll go through some of that later in this video. But you'll want to consider what carrots are good for storage. There are some carrots that all carrots will store to some length of time, right? But some carrots store extremely well. We still have carrots in our refrigerator now, and it is the end of April, okay? So, and those carrots would have been dug up in October at the latest, most likely. So things to consider are, how long do you want your carrots to store? Are you wanting to eat them mostly just for fresh eating? And if that's the case, well, then maybe you want to plant carrots that are all very early maturing carrots, because then you can succession sow those. You can plant them very early in the season, get a whole bunch of crop succession sown after that, and then they size up quickly and you can harvest them quickly, right? And then you're eating fresh carrots much longer. Or maybe you live in a more mild climate than I do, and you want to store those carrots in the ground for the winter. I would never do that here. Our ground has frost and is hard as a rock, up to like 3 or 4 feet down in the ground. I would never be able to dig those carrots up. And so that is not my goal, but maybe for you, your ground does not freeze like that, and you would like to just store them in the ground. So maybe you want to find a carrot that does that the best. The next tip is you really need to thin your carrots. Now, this doesn't mean that once all your carrot seedlings come up, you just go through and you instantly thin them all out to like 2 inches apart. You can do that if that's what you wish to do. For me, I aim to plant my seedlings so that I maybe have 3 carrots come up every inch. Hopefully, that's the goal, right? Occasionally, I'll accidentally dump a bunch of carrot seed in one spot and I have to go in immediately and like thin out 100 little carrots that I put in the wrong area. Maybe not 100, but you get my drift. So I aim to have a few carrot seedlings every inch or 2. And then what I do is I leave those in the ground until they start to size up and are maybe like a baby carrot size, right? And then I thin out those baby carrots. And then those baby carrots become my supper or our kids' snacks or my snack in the garden when I'm hungry and I'm still out there working thinning carrots, right? So I like to thin my carrots as they are edible. That way, my thinnings don't go to waste either, and I'm utilizing every little bitty thing that I put in the ground. I aim to have my final spacing on carrots to be about 1 inch to 2 inches. That way they can really size up well for storage through the winter. But that being said, again, I'm thinning as I go. So maybe out of that clump of 3, I harvest the one biggest one of each clump, and those become the first ones I bring in. And then I go back and I harvest the second biggest one out of those, a week or 2 later. And so think that way when you're thinning carrots. Think, how can I best utilize this crop so that as little of it goes to waste as possible? So let's move on to what some of my favorite carrot varieties are. This has changed over the years, and as I've started growing carrots for market, it's changed again. However, there are a handful of them that have always been staples in what I plant because I like variety, and I also store for winter, right? So I'm aiming for carrots as quickly as I can get them, and then I'm also aiming for carrots that will last me long into those months when I'm no longer growing carrots. The first carrot on my list is mokum. Mokum is a delectable carrot. It is sweet, it's crunchy, it's easy to pull out of the ground, it's a beautifully shaped carrot. It's great for market. It sizes up quickly. I think the baby size on it is like 34 days and full size is 54 days. So I plant this one for the market, right? But I also love it for our home because it sizes up quickly. It's an absolutely delicious carrot, and it actually stores fairly decent as well, okay? So even though I am growing it for market, it's also a beautiful carrot to last in the refrigerator for your family. Bolero is the second carrot variety that I plant all the time. It is a fantastic storage carrot. It sweetens up in storage. It is a nice blunt-tipped carrot, so you're talking 7 to 8 inch carrots. It sizes up fairly fast at 75 days, I believe it is. It's a nance or a nance or a nantes type carrot, however you say that in your area. It is simply a beautiful carrot and stores fantastic for our family. Sugar Snacks 54 is another wonderful carrot. This one I mentioned earlier on, where it grows incredibly long if the conditions are right. It's a little bit thinner carrot. It still sizes up well, but it doesn't get big and bulky. Although it can, if it's growing 18 inches long, you could still end up with a 1.5 to 2-inch carrot at the top, right? But it is deliciously sweet, an absolute beautiful carrot. Highly recommend Sugar Snacks 54. There's also another variety, Candy Snacks, and I think that Tender Sweet, I think, is another variety that's very similar. I think that one might be from Gurney's or something, but Candy Snacks and Sugar Snacks, I find that they're very similar, and I love both of those. The Carota variety of carrots are another one that I love. New Carota was the variety that I initially fell in love with. What I love about this carrot is that even if I'm not the best at getting it thinned out, it seems as though they're very good at pushing away from one another and sizing up regardless of my inability to do what I am supposed to be doing as the gardener. They're sweet, they store really well, they're like a 7 to 8 inch length carrot and really size up well. I absolutely love Carota carrots and almost any type of them. New Carota, is it Shin Carota, I think, and there's one other one that you'll see now, but there's a few different companies that sell those, and I highly recommend all of them. Red Cord Chantenay is another carrot that I really, really love. It's much broader up top and then develops into a bit more of a point. It's great for rocky, hard soils if that is something that you struggle with. It's always sweet. It has a really nice carroty flavor. Just a beautiful carrot for those times when you maybe have not the best soil but need a reliable carrot. If you enjoy something a little bit different, Dragon and Cosmic Purple, although I prefer the Dragon over the Cosmic Purple, are also fantastic carrots. Both of them are purple on the outside and they are an orange core in the center. Some people describe the flavor as spicy. I don't know that I would say spicy, but it definitely tastes kind of spiced, right? Like it's a little bit more than just your typical carroty flavor, but they're so much fun. I don't prefer these when I'm preserving. If I'm going to be making soups or things like that, they're not the carrot that I'm throwing in those. Partly because you're going to peel that carrot a lot of times, and sometimes you might peel away the purple, but also because they can change the coloring of whatever you're making and make it a little bit less appealing. I love Dragon and Cosmic Purple roasted or for fresh eating. They're absolutely beautiful on a veggie tray. Yellowstone is another fantastic carrot if you're looking for something a little bit different. It's a yellow carrot, hence the name Yellowstone. Also just beautifully sweet, maybe not quite as carroty as an orange carrot, but absolutely delicious and fun for the kids. I would think of it as kind of like the difference between a yellow tomato and a red tomato. The yellow carrot is a little bit more sweet and mild, hence why children often love it. Now that we've gone through some of the varieties of carrots, and there will be more on the blog post that is attached to this video, you can pop over there and see other varieties, and along with all this information that I've typed up for you that you can reference as need be. But let's dive in a little bit into how I plant my carrots. I absolutely love planting my carrots in block plantings. I do this with pretty much all of my crops, but I do it especially with my carrots because I feel like it is the most efficient way to plant them. So I'm not having so much wasted space between walkways with just like a single row of carrots, or maybe a double row of carrots. So what this means is that picture a raised bed, right? That is what I want you to picture when I say I'm planting a block of carrots. Most raised beds aim to be about 4 feet wide to 8 feet long. That's kind of your standard raised bed that you're going to purchase if it's a wooden raised bed, okay? Let's think of that as one block, okay? So it's 4 feet across in width, and what I'm doing is about every 6 to 8 inches, I'm planting a long 8-foot row of carrots, and then I will skip about 6 to 8 inches, and I'll plant another 8-foot row of carrots. And I will just keep doing this across the bed. This way I can really maximize that space that's used. I can grow a ton of carrots, and I am not wasting extra space with a bunch of walkways. I can still reach all the way into the center of that bed to thin out and weed my carrots, but I'm not having a 1-foot section of carrots planted and then 3 feet on either side of them when I could be planting a wider bed of carrots. So I thoroughly enjoy planting my carrots as a block. They're still in rows, but there's multiple rows grown together. Now, troubleshooting carrots. Really, the main problem that I have with carrots partway through the season is that sometimes they get carrot root fly. Now, I have had luck with planting like a block of maybe a 4x4 foot block of carrots, and then in between those blocks I plant like a row of rosemary, something that's really potent to help hide the scent of the carrots from the root flies. Now, I don't know why they start. I don't know what attracts them. I have heard that the pulling up of the carrots excretes the scent or releases the scent that they're attracted to. And so then therefore they end up in your bed and they burrow down into the flies, lay their eggs on the base of the soil, and then those root flies get down into your crop. It's gross. If anyone's dealt with them, they're just gross, right? It rots your carrots. Usually you can tell if you have this if the tops of your carrots had been looking quite healthy and now you're seeing these like brown leaves of the carrots, or like rotting of the leaves of the carrot tops. It's just a really not lovely sight to see, right? Because once you have it, there isn't a whole lot you can do about it. If I do notice that I have carrot root fly, I know those carrots are not going to store well for me, okay? So what I'm doing with those then is they're not really marketable at the market at that point either. So I'm pulling them up. I'm pulling those carrots as soon as they're ready and they're sized up. I pull them, I peel them. I may blanch them if I feel like blanching anything that day, and I will freeze those carrots because they're not going to store long-term in my fridge. I don't usually that time of the year want to go through the process of canning any carrots, and I will can carrots, but it's not my favorite. I will put them in soups and things that I'm canning. So say I have some soups that I need to can up that day, I will prioritize using carrots like the ones that did have issues with the carrot root flies. I will prioritize using those in those products so that obviously cut away the parts that aren't good and use just the good stuff, right? But then they're not going to waste. So you don't have to waste your crop. It's not something that has to just go to the compost pile. You can still utilize that crop well. Just know that they are not going to store well for you in the refrigerator. I have heard a lot of people in Europe, they deal with this. So I don't know if it's like a hot and humid type thing or what it is, but I know that sometimes they have good luck covering their carrots so that the flies, the carrot root fly just can't get to them in the first place, kind of like how you would protect your broccoli and your cabbage and things like that from the white moth butterfly that attacks them, right? So maybe that's something you want to consider. I haven't dealt with it enough for it to be an issue that I feel like I need to deal with all the time. I do, if I notice that I have those in an area, I will purposefully not plant carrots near that space the following year. Now, how do we store our carrots for winter? This is super easy and people make it way more complicated than it needs to be, especially since many of us do not have root cellars anymore. Many of us do not have spaces conducive to storing carrots in sand or sawdust or whatever it might be. Okay, so as one person who doesn't have those conditions to possibly another who doesn't have those conditions, I will tell you what I do. I usually try to wait to harvest our carrots for long-term storage until fall. Particularly, I'm saving my later plantings for those storage carrots because they're sizing up when the weather is getting cooler. Carrots are going to be the sweetest if they've experienced cold weather, so I like to harvest them after a frost or two if possible, just light frost, not heavy freezes. Once they've experienced that, I'm pulling up those carrots. If they have mud on them, which oftentimes we're quite rainy in the fall and they will be fairly dirty carrots, I will spray off any large bits of dirt. Now, I'm not trying to clean the carrots, right? They don't need to be spick and span and spotless, but I don't want them to be muddy, okay? Another thing that I'm doing is right when I pull those carrots out of the ground, while I'm sitting there pulling the carrots up, I usually have a scissors with me and I'm cutting the tops off of the carrots, not the top of the carrot, but I'm cutting the greens off of the carrot. And I cut those greens so that they're no more than like a ½ inch, but really you can cut them all the way down to the top of the carrot, okay? So you're taking the greens off the carrot, and then those greens cannot steal energy and moisture from that carrot that you've just pulled, okay? So yes, they're pretty. Yes, it's beautiful to see all those greens attached to your carrots as you're hauling them to the vehicle, but it's really imperative to get those greens off as quickly as possible when you are storing carrots for winter. I like to do it out there because then the mess is out there, right? They fit in my bag, harvest bag better. I can leave those tops as long as they don't have a lot of root fly and things like that in them. I can leave those tops right on the bed that I just pulled those carrots from, and they can decompose over the winter and help build the soil, right? So cut those tops off, rinse off any like excess dirt and mud that might be on those carrots, and then I let them air dry. You don't need them bone dry, but you don't want them to be super wet. You could take a towel and like pat them dry if you would like, but you want them to dry off some. Then I take a Ziploc bag, and I like the slider top bags. I like to use the gallon size bags. I've also used the 2 gallon size bags if I can find them. But what I like about the gallon size bag is that they're easy for me to gift or sell to someone if they need carrots. And if some do happen to go bad, I don't have this giant 2 gallon bag of carrots that are now all getting icky together. It's confined to a smaller space. They're also easier for me to maneuver around refrigerators. So once those carrots are in those bags, if it does seem like there's a lot of excess moisture in them still, I may tuck a paper towel down inside of there just to help absorb some of that moisture. I zip it closed and I put it in my refrigerator. That's it. That's all you need to do. Now, we have an extra refrigerator specifically purchased for the storage of garden vegetables, right? Vegetables that get us through the winter. I highly recommend doing that if that is something that you can afford to do and that you have space to do. Most people have, especially if you're in a home, most people have an extra fridge that they keep somewhere for the overflow of, all the things, mostly beverages and parties where you have all the extra food, right? We bought ours specifically dedicated to vegetable storage, and I store my carrots and my beets and all those types of things in there through the winter. And there you go. It's that simple. Storing carrots for winter is a fantastic way to supplement your family's fresh vegetable diet without having to go to the store and purchase them. I absolutely love being able to put food up for the winter in such an easy way where I'm not having to run around like a chicken with my head cut off trying to figure out how to preserve all this food and can up all this food and dehydrate all this food. Now, I will do that if I notice that maybe they're not storing quite as well for some reason that year, which doesn't often happen. Or maybe there's just a bag or two that just aren't looking the greatest. Maybe they were harvested earlier in the summer and they're not lasting as long. If we're not eating through them, then maybe I will dehydrate them, or I'll can up some soups with them, or I'll just prioritize eating those first. But it is so simple to put food away for your family. We have made it so complicated, and it really does not need to be. I hope that this video helps you to feel a little bit more confident in growing carrots and storing them up for your family. I'll be making more videos like this about other crops that we store up for winter, and I hope that you will join me on those episodes as well.